David Page is, for those of you who don't know him, he's a partner architect in Page & Park Architects. He's also a visiting professor at Strathclyde University. And I think it's worth mentioning that Page & Park Architects was established in 1981, and it has since developed as one of Scotland's best known practices, undertaking work over a range of sectors with concentration on both public sector projects and urban renewal. Key projects that he thought I should mention related to important historical contexts include Eden Court Theatre in Inverness, McManus Art Gallery and Museum in Dundee. There's also the National Portrait Gallery and the FS02 School, both of which are in Edinburgh. We have the Rosslyn Chapel project south of Edinburgh, and in Glasgow, the Lighthouse Centre for Architecture and Design. And currently on site is the extension to the Theatre Royal for Scottish Opera. David will be speaking today on the importance of ideas. So please welcome David Page.
I speak as an architect in some way. I'm embarrassed to be amongst this erudition from this morning, but please bear with me. I'd like to just put James's formula in a document page and sort of, in analysing it, sort of place my relationship to his concept about how to look at heritage. And I think it's important. I want to look at 4 projects essentially. They're more about heritage than world heritage. 2 are in the World Heritage Site and 2 are out with. I wonder whether world heritage and whether heritage, do you discriminate between inside the boundary and outside the boundary? I'm not sure. So the purpose is, in the factor, I'll focus on heritage. How do we act? And I think if I could sort of just write what the 2 things that drive us. One is extreme caution, and the other is creativity. And if you put extreme creativity, these are 2 strategies that we apply for everything. So when at Rosslyn, when we, the client, and it's interesting, you kept suggesting people and the role of people in the process of building. The client wanted to improve the reception that people got before they went into the chapel. What is improved reception? It's the toilets, it's the ticket, it's the shop, it's the cup of coffee. It's the irrelevant stuff relative to the heritage but important to the experience of the people. If you've gone to Rosslyn Chapel historically, the idea that you would have been provided with a coffee before you got there was nonsense. So our usual reaction on important heritage sites is to go as far away as possible from the heritage itself. That's our starting point, extreme caution. So when the client says they wanted the reception centre just beside that road, they wanted the reception there. We tried to put it over here, the Raven Hall building over here, tried to put it in that field. We said put it as far away as possible. But they were insistent. It was not about another building. It was about building the facilities that facilitated that routine. So what's interesting for me is that architecture didn't drive the issue of changing that heritage. There was some other, it was people and their needs and desires. It wasn't architecture itself. So are we missing something in our factoring there? So you have this wonderful, so how on earth do you put something up against that heritage when in fact you don't want to be there in the first place? So there's a kind of a process of examination of the remarkable restoration. The fact that you originally went through that gate, that transitional gate, and that gate wasn't original to the 1500s building, it was different. But there was this transition, this little tiny transition that you crossed between. So essentially the kind of the philosophy was, if you can't come in through the door, then this becomes your door. It's amazing the difference between entrance now, all that stuff you need to enter, when you could just previously go through the gate. It was enough to go through the gate. So we've got all that stuff. In order to get back to the same position as if you've gone through the gate itself, it seemed to us that we had to expand this dimension into the place that you pass through. So that gate therefore became that truss system that receded into the distance, that became that route in, through, and through here. And architecturally, John's here, Simpson Brown, a lovely restoration of this little building here. The way it's stepped down the hill by using that truss system of the gate, forming that into a series of stepping planes to reduce the sense of scale. So that becomes part of it. This thing hiding behind this object. And I've got to reiterate, this was not driven by us wanting to do architecture. We were put in a position to have to somehow perform in that position or walk away. And that's the question that you face in terms of that process and looking back down through that idea that somehow it wasn't a building, it was simply a covered street. A lich gate that actually kind of led you in off that street. It was a kind of non-attempted, non-building. Jump to another project, Fettes. Fettes, that incredible bright kind of just elaboration of nature as it kind of explodes from the ground. And then jump to 50 years later, Kinnaman's amazing dining hall, which, when you actually study it, you realise that it's set within the trees of the garden. So that whereas Bryce creates a decoration throughout his building and in the admiration of the detail, Kinnaman takes the idea of nature and creates these trees that rise up and the canopy of the building that drapes down as this series of branches around that setting. So you stand within nature. And what's interesting about this is, in terms of coming back to James' thing, is that new architecture? And I wonder, in the same way that the stables, which Simpson and Brown did outside Roslin, hundreds of years after Roslin, that is actually new, as opposed to old. So I'm starting to wonder whether it's actually take the factor new out and just say it's architecture. And what we're asking for is architecture in response to heritage, as opposed to whether it's new. If you say you're going to eat something, I'm going to eat to that, I'm going to new eat. You don't. It's just part of your life. So the idea, we don't need the new, we need simply architecture. And what that means in terms of some quick look at a couple of projects. We were asked to do the sixth form centre. We've done a number over 10 years. We were asked to do the sixth form centre. We evolved that form, girls and boys, sixth form, keep them separated as the central. They're grown up, going to university, so they can actually sort of meet within the middle safely without causing trouble that get the parents upset. But the design of this curve was such that the hope that this class building from the 1960s would ultimately be removed, in which case then this curve would frame the view of the dining hall in relationship to the main college building. That class building may well end up being listed because of this time. So there was a kind of strategy of the new and the old, and we were talking about stone, girls and boys. But its framing and its angle is all about an orientation to the main tower itself. So not only is it about the curve of the long-term master plan, but the relationship to that orientating tower. And this lovely bridge, the idea was the staff, if they needed an emergency to get up to the girls' side and boys' side, it was a shortcut. And that's a great thing that architecture made out of need, which was what happened. So that the building is about the original Fettes building and then the simplicity of that wonderful dining hall. Again, both old now, and the insertion then of the new concert hall and academic building, which will be built over the next piece. But the alignment, the orientation of the giant crow step that forms the step that ultimately sets the kind of line for the kind of the dining hall, and then the orientation of the central axis on the war memorial in terms of the kind of the ventilation shafts, are about the ideas of and what that's made me think, well, those two projects made me think, I'm reflecting on that somehow this relationship isn't right. That actually, architecture needs to come out and its use or user needs to come in relationship with heritage. So I was saying to fact that it's use and heritage that drives things. It's use, it's people. Take the people away from Edinburgh and you have archaeology, you have Pompeii, but it's the use that drives and the use that we work with. The portrait gallery, a wonderful piece. The number of people those steps in front of that, we spent 2 years talking about those steps. And the number of people who wanted to keep that demarcation from the pavement. It's okay that disabled could come in the ramp down the side here. That's okay. But is it okay? Is it that immense discussion. And then this whole historical sequence into the Great Hall. But the problem is, where are the toilets? Where's the tickets? Where's all the shop? Where's the cafe? All that peripheral stuff that we need to have to get into this thing. So my colleague came up with this thing we did. So this is the result of we actually, this is a secret, we conceived this National Portrait Gallery with a big face, the mouth, and a wonderful tongue sticking out to the folk who didn't want to step on it. Because that is about a universal access, which is really important. But having established that, what? There was a little toilet here and there was a security office here. By simply opening up those two walls, suddenly the loggia of the building, this wonderful arcade, became like those wonderful Florentine, realistic founding hospitals and one that I kind of wondered. Make Italy, take the glass out, and you have this lovely loggia along the kind of the side of the building. So it all becomes part of one piece. And then the insertion into that of, I saw this piece of folded spectacles, like the idea of an inserted ship into a bottle that sort of hung within that space that defined that axis. The great thing of Raman Anderson's express structure and just the lovely engineers, the way they were able to sort of hang all this stuff off what was like a picture frame, to stand up there and become a portrait within this. So one lens, as the other side is a lens into that. So finally to St Mary's, which is probably the heritage side. So in coming back to this use, in a way, what we're constraining is use and heritage. That's the cautionary thing. But what's going to give it its kind of inspiration? For a long time, the medical centre in just off the medical centre, I wanted to relocate from a very difficult multi-storey situation into a different place. And it talked to people for a long time about using the garden. Hugely challenging kind of process. But what the cathedral said is if we can take the Walpole Hall and make it a cafe, and if we can make the whole nature of the circulation part of a public edge, we could transform the otherwise internalized historic fabric to have an outward perception, an outward face. And so that's essentially what's happened. And in the same way that the portrait gallery, the opening up of those arcades, allows you to see and make it more accessible, more or less threatening in terms of entry. You know how you walk through the kind of the new town of Edinburgh, and you look in the windows of flats? I don't know if people do that. And you walk in, and you see the fantastic painting some people have, the terrible state that other people keep things. There's a kind of wonderful nosiness that we have about looking in, and it seemed to us that that circulation pattern of the medical centre, to turn it inside out, to take the circulation to the outside, to create, and these lines are about protecting the tree roots distances. So these lines form this landscape edge, and then the more solid bit forms this kind of village in the middle. So there's an internalized bit, and the stone yard now gets incorporated within that building with acoustic treatment between the different spaces. So that becomes that. That's about architecture, about experience. It's about people walking along that edge, using that cafe, kind of turning inside out of the activities of the these are just the motions and the garden on the roof. So there were four. So where does architecture sit within our new thing? I think architecture sits out with it. It sits as something that transforms this into something even better. That's good anyway, but there are pressures within that seem that somehow need to be contained. And so I just thought, we'll just add the word ideas. Architecture and ideas rather than architecture and new. Architecture ideas as being the kind of the power, and just to make it make it minus, so we'll make it an imaginary number. So the imaginary number transforms, which is complete nonsense. So just forget about all that. Anyway, that's our architect's contribution. Thank you.